Well, that didn't take long. Adrian Griffin out as head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks, despite the 30-13 record. I don't know if he's going to get another head coaching job. Kind of cool to be like, yeah, I won 7% of the games of my career. Not many people can say that when they walk away. As an aside, anyone that's ever listened to this pod and heard me talk about Adrian Griffin, the player, knows I was a huge fan. I know it doesn't make a ton of sense. I just love the way he saw the game in a very advanced way. There's no mixtape. There's not going to be a video where somebody tweets, kids today just don't understand Adrian Griffin. And he didn't really even play all that long. I just loved him at a time where I just thought, man, if everyone saw the game the way this guy sees it. He's interviewed a million times. He finally gets his chance. I was thrilled for him. We had him on the pod. But I would say that it was not a secret, if you are plugged into the NBA at all, that it was just these rumblings, the hints. You're like, what is going on with that team? We can get to the numbers. Number 2 offense in the NBA, but 21st on defense, 26th on defense the last 10. They're tied for they're tied for second best record in the NBA. They're only 3.5 games behind the Celtics. They smashed them, and you can get into the Celtics schedule part of it, but whatever. The Terry Stotts thing wasn't a great sign at the very beginning of the year, where it gets into an argument with Stotts. Stotts is off the team. Stotts with head coaching experience. I always thought Stotts was actually a pretty good X and O guy in the times that I've watched his teams. And then there was the other stories. We find out just this morning that Doc Rivers to the Bucks is official. He'll be leaving the Ringer, and he's going to be the head coach of the Bucks. We'll get to that here in a second. But that the Bucks had been reaching out to Doc to kind of consult behind the scenes, which I'm sure if you're Adrian Griffin, you'd be like, I don't really need this. So on January 6th, we knew it was bad because Giannis said this quote in the postgame, quote, defensively, we have to have a plan. What is our strategy? Apparently the strategy was to kind of change around the assignments. And it's funny because people got sick of Coach Bud because he was stubborn. But it worked defensively. Lopez was basically dropping off of everything, always staying fixed in the paint. The Lopez contested shot numbers got some of us voters to be like, wait, do I have to take a second look at Brook Lopez as Defensive Player of the Year? When there are other times where I would watch and be like, well, you have Drew Holiday at the point of attack. You have Giannis swarming all over the place, and Brook doesn't really have to leave all that much. So then you look at the system this year, and Brook clearly didn't love the idea of like, wait, I've got to chase all these guys around. I have to stay out and blitz on a screen and roll. I have to trap 30 plus feet away from the hoop. I'm supposed to close out on corner threes. Like I liked last year. I liked the Bud system way more than this. Then there's the Lillard part of this, where if you look at his field goal attempts, they're down. But what was going to happen? What'd you think was going to happen when he went to the Bucks as opposed to the Portland show that he was able to run for such a long time? And Lillard's terrific offensive player, but shot attempts 21 last year per game to 17.5. That makes sense. The field goal percentage is down a bit, 46 to 43, but he's a career 44% shooter. You know, that's one of the things, despite how dynamic Lillard is as a scorer, sometimes there's some real high volume stuff where you look at the overall shooting numbers. Like he was 37% from three last year on 11 attempts, 8.5 attempts this year, 35%, but he's 37% for his career. The free throw attempts, you know, he was out of control last year with it 9.5 per game. He's at 8 attempts per game, which is the second highest of his career this year. The usage went from 34 last year to 28. He's always been around the 30s, you know, in the second half of his career as he became a dominant player. And offensively, the box score numbers have dipped down. And defensively, he's always been terrible on defense. Not debatable. So I don't know if Lillard is upset about the system or if he's upset about some of the traditional stats dipping down there a bit. I don't know what he thought it was going to be. Maybe that's why he wanted to go to Miami, going, that Butler guy takes a lot of time off. I'll get more shots up. There's probably more nuanced looks at what's supposed to happen here. But if you look at Giannis, his usage rate dipped from 39 last year, which is an absurd number, to 33 this year. But his true shooting percentage is the best of his career, which would make sense because you're less likely to be able to crash onto Giannis the way you have in the past because you're not really that scared of the shooters, despite, you know, some of the shooters that they've had that you respect. You know, Grayson Allen was there. Middleton obviously is a shot maker, but Lillard's an entirely different animal because you are so worried about how high Lillard initiates his offense that it's just stretching you out defensively. So it's actually kind of worked there for a bit for Giannis. So I don't know if it's just, hey, I don't love running this, or I don't like being off the ball this much, or I don't like where I'm getting to initiate. If Lillard just wants to dribble it up 80 to 90 times and get a high screen and then pull up from 30 or get to the hoop, because that's the other great thing about Lillard is he's a smaller player, but he's still so quick and crafty enough to finish at the rim and the free throw parts of it. Like, it's not a complete disaster. We're talking about the number 2 offense. So I'd love to get like the truth serum on really what was upsetting to Lillard. Or did Lillard, Lopez, Middleton, guys that have been around, maybe even Middleton and Lopez more so, going like, look, whatever we were doing defensively, despite people's frustration with Bud's rules, remember like Giannis not getting to play on Jimmy Butler, Giannis being asked about it after that series last year, and he just is like, I don't know. You're like, okay, a little bit more freedom, a little bit more creativity. And you're like, yeah, but now we're terrible. Now we're terrible on defense. So can we just go back to what it was? So I wonder if that was more of the motivation than me just wondering if Lillard's complaints were solely about just getting more shots or having the offense more tailored to him, which was just not a reality because he's playing with somebody like Giannis, somebody he's never played with before. So maybe it's just still supposed to take a little bit more time. I don't know, man. Look, they had the Cleveland loss without Giannis where they got smoked. They had the January losses the first week there where they lost to Houston and Utah. They lost 4 out of 5 against the Pacers. The in-season tournament game, being there live and watching how terrible they were on defense, it was alarming. I don't think this is even as bad as the David Blatt thing, where David Blatt made it to the NBA Finals, then went 30-11, and then he was fired. But it might just be as simple as the personality, because everything I'd heard about then with Blatt was just players didn't like him. And if the players don't like you and you've spent all this money and you have a chance for a championship, which is what the Bucks certainly have, and you add in the Jimmy Haslam part of it, if you look at his NFL history with coaches, if they were all in agreement, like, look, this just isn't going to work, it can seem entirely unfair that somebody at 30-13 loses their job. But I don't know that I think it's the wrong thing. And by the way, that Cavs team went on to come back against Golden State down 3-1 and win a title after they'd made the change. So we've covered some of the defensive stuff here, but just to add to it, when you switch out Drew Holiday for Dame on defense, you're not going to be as good defensively. I know most of you know that already, right? But the problem with Dame is, and it was even funny too when he got traded there. I think there was a couple stories, and maybe been a quote from him. It was like, it's not that I'm bad on defense. It's just that it's like, no, you're like disinterested. You can't be bothered with it sometime, which is why it's so incredibly frustrating. So I'd love to know the truth of his frustration and what that is. I don't know if there'll be as much outrage about Doc getting the job over the in-house assistant Prunty as there was with Finch getting the job in Minnesota. I like the hire. I like the hire for Doc here. I know the approval rating for Doc is lower. I wouldn't say lower than I realize, because I realize it. I know he has the 3-3-1 leads that he's blown. The ace seed with Orlando against Detroit, to me, who cares? The Houston one against the Clippers is terrible. The Denver one against the Clippers is also terrible. The one that really has always bothered me is the 7-game series against Atlanta. But, I'll never understand that one. If you want to go back and read about that and the blown leads and how absurd some of the history was in that, I would say don't go back and watch it if you're a Sixers fan. But was it on Doc, or did Ben Simmons, after he went 4-14 from the free throw line in Game 5, was he just done? Do you realize I looked this up again this morning, Ben Simmons took 1 shot total in the fourth quarter the last 6 games of that series. So a guy who's supposed to be your second dude, the thing you've been building around, just completely loses it in a series. There's certain things that happen in these headlines of Doc blows another 3-1 lead. Here's what I know about Doc. He's great with stars. He just is. Not saying it works every single time, but I saw it firsthand in Boston. And even if there was a little pushback initially and, a younger point guard in Rondo, where Rondo's always the smartest guy in the room. And, I don't think Rondo's history is that he is in a hurry to get along with everybody. But as much as there's criticism of Doc, this might be exactly what they need. A guy that's been through it all and a guy that understands stars as a head coach. Couple quick things here. Speaking of Ben Simmons, we had video last night as the Knicks took out the Nets of Ben getting some shots up. Nothing says March like some videos of Ben Simmons going through a workout. Now, I'm trying to be fair here because we're talking about another injury that they just can't seem to figure out. But I am a little worried he's running out of outfits. Because it's 2 days later, I'm not leading the pod with Embiid's 70 points. If I don't have a pod, I can't do it that day. That was incredible. As you were watching it happen, you're like, dude, is he going to get 80 tonight? And it was completely within the realm of possibility. Like, it could have happened. And San Antonio was in the game enough that Embiid had to stay out. It was justifiable to keep Embiid out. And I wanted to see it happen. I hate when they pull guys early. We're like, oh, you don't need it. Respect the game. In this case, I don't know that. I think Pop wanted him to get 70. They didn't double team him until like late. And then the best part for Embiid is he had to defend Sohan, so he just didn't defend him. So he would just go down and kind of hang by the paint and be like, whatever, if you're going to hit a couple shots, go ahead and hit him. But now this becomes the MVP conversation where there's no other choice. But we know with the new rule with the NBA for the postseason awards, it's 65 games, and you got to play 20 or more minutes in those 65 games. You can't just check in for a possession and then out and be like, all right, cool. Embiid, as of this morning, I believe, depending on what you're looking at here, he's on pace for 62 and a half games. So I would never say the MVP race is over 42, 44 games into the season because things can change. But where he's at statistically, where he's at historically with some of this stuff. And then if you really want to add in the unfair part of it is like, hey, centers haven't done this because that part of it just feels like I don't even know that you can just compare Embiid historically to centers. I don't know how anybody could vote for anybody else for MVP, but because of the rule, this thing is still in play. And that's going to suck if Embiid's at like 63 games and it just happened. I can't imagine they're going to let that happen. But if you were legitimately like at a point where he has to get through some kind of injury and he keeps this pace up and this kind of scoring, it's going to suck. And by the way, as I say all of those things, I still think Jokic is the better player. Two things that I want to hit on. I guess it could be three things, because they're my favorite things, Coltrane. When Jordan Poole said earlier this year, quote, my basketball legacy is taken care of with a championship ring, I couldn't help but be like, that's pretty much all I need to know. Like Jordan Poole, like, what are you, 38? Like, and again, the Jordan Poole jokes, like there were so many, we almost got sick of them. Like, I don't even know if that's good content anymore, right? But it was hot the first couple of months of the season. But when you hear something like that, you just go, why would you admit it? But why are you wired that way? Now, granted, there's 450 of these guys, even more when you think about all the different guys that get signed and waived throughout an NBA season. A lot of people out there playing, well, there's not a huge number of people that are in the NBA, but for a given season, a lot of players, a lot of people, a lot of thoughts. Doesn't mean everybody's going to be thinking the same way. But Deandre Ayton the other night, and by the way, a week where he couldn't make it to the game because of ice. And it's like, what? And look, even people on social media weren't like, hey, do you realize how dangerous these storms can get? Like, normally there's that lane of people like finding a way to still defend the player. Like, find a way, get to the game. You want to know why you never hear that? Because it just doesn't happen. So Ayton doesn't make it to the game. And he said recently, quote, I've got nothing to prove in this league. I'm a max player, and I'll continue to be a max player. That's why he's not on the Suns. All right? That's why when you watch him and how physically gifted he is and the touch that he has and the athleticism, where you go, this dude should be a beast. But not everybody's a beast. There's no internal beast there. All right? He is totally cool with, I'm a max player, and I don't know that he's going to be one the next time around. Because one of the most surprising things, if you just want to talk about like player role, what my expectations were, I figured Ayton would put up big numbers with Portland, get a bunch of shots, and somebody would talk themselves into it again. That's not happened. He's getting 12 points, 10 boards. His shooting percentage is the worst of his career. That guy's playing, almost 30 minutes a game, and he's averaging a free throw and a half attempt per game. DeAndre Ayton. He has only 3 games this season where he scored 20 or more. Now, granted, when you watch Trailblazers games, a lot of guards out there. A lot of guards taking a lot of shots, including my guy Scoot. But I didn't know he could be more checked out than Phoenix, where he was frustrated that it was clear the vets just didn't trust him anymore, right? That he just wasn't a dude that was built for some of that stuff, even though physically he actually was built for it, but mentally just not that guy. And that in Portland, where I thought he'd put up some numbers and trick everybody, he's instead decided to be like, no, I'm totally cool being fairly checked out every night. I don't even need the touches. Just let me sit out a game every other week or so, put on the fit, and let everybody know that my goals are already accomplished. And I know some of you are saying, who cares? He's making money, generational stuff. Yeah, but he's not in sales. There's still supposed to be something competitive about this sport. And I love these quotes.